So my name is Sean Ginevan. I work at Google. I work on the enterprise strategy of Android Enterprise. So what that basically means is we're the team that is responsible for all the features that makes Android Enterprise ready, whether it's application deployment, security, configuration management, management of applications, all that falls under our team. And so by history, I've worked in the EMM community for a long time. I was at Mobile Iron doing a mix of product management and business stuff, and now I'm here. And what I wanted to talk about today was really kind of where the market is and maybe cutting through a lot of the noise that exists about Android, particularly when you're talking about it from a business-to-business setting. How many of you are enterprise-focused developers or your IT folks? About half the room. The Johnson & Johnson guys have to put their hands up because you guys are wearing this shirt. So the fact of the matter is most of you here are enterprise folks. How many of you run Android inside of your organization? Okay, how many of you want to? Okay, everybody's hands should go up. So we're going to talk a little bit about helping you build some of that business case as well. So when we look at Android as a business platform, we really see it as the most diverse computing platform in history. And what that means is there is no other platform that can span all the different form factors and use cases that Android can. And when you add Chromebooks into this situation, the ability to build native applications onto Chromebooks and the extension of managed Google Play onto Chromebooks really means that you can go all the way from a smartphone and tablet that we know today all the way out to your laptop and everything in between. We work with over 200 different OEM partners that build devices that span from point of sale, barcode scanners, interactive kiosks, digital displays, even emerging tool sets like virtual reality can all be built on top of the Android platform. And what this means from an IT perspective is that ultimately you have sort of one code base to build against. You're not having to retrain and recode to factor for all the different form factors that exist inside of your organization. So from a cost of ownership perspective, that's huge. And obviously on the horizon, we see things like IoT and a lot of the announcements that came out of Google Cloud Next a few months ago or a few weeks ago really have focused on how Android Things is being brought into the fold and being used for a lot of those emerging applications like computer vision, quality control, data collection, and the like. Our goal for enterprises and developers alike is threefold. One is that we want enterprises to be able to have one consistent application development and deployment architecture that spans all these different form factors. We don't want to have you rethink, oh, I'm building to a kiosk that's going to sit in the lobby of my organization or my theater for ticket taking, and then I have to reimagine that entire process for the laptop that manages that ticket data. This ultimately gives you one consistent environment to manage those devices as well as the applications that sit on them. That same idea of one platform spans all these different device types. Again, we want that to be consistent. And over the last 5 versions of Android, all the way back to Lollipop, the management and security framework from an enterprise perspective has been consistent. So you don't, in the early days, you had to think about, oh, I'm running Android on a particular piece of hardware, and what are the idiosyncrasies of Samsung versus LG? We've really brought a lot of those security and management tools directly in the platform, so you don't have to think about that. It's sort of abstracted away from you. And ultimately, we also focus on the concept of BYOD, or bring your own device. I think we're past the hype cycle of that. At one point, the industry was all BYOD, and then it sort of went away from BYOD, and now we're sort of at that happy medium where there's a lot of cases where bring your own device makes sense. I don't think we expect people to bring their own barcode scanner, but getting access to workplace communications, email, and the like does. And so we've added tool sets in the platform that segment work data from personal so users can bring their own applications and not have that intersect or interact with the data that you want to deploy and keep secure on an enterprise device. One of the lesser known facts about Android is that it's ultimately been the leading compute platform from a mobile perspective inside of enterprises. So 380 million Android devices are expected to ship into businesses in 2018 alone. 65% of corporate liable or devices that are bought by an organization for their employees are running Android today. When you look at this from a BYOD perspective, 81% of those devices are running Android today. So if you're a commercial developer targeting enterprise use cases, Android's an incredibly target-rich environment for you to build against. We also obviously bring to Android the world's largest app store in Google Play, not just from a consumer perspective. I think we're all aware of all the consumer benefits that that Play provides, but we also do this from an enterprise, provide a lot of tools from an enterprise perspective as well. If you're building custom applications for your organization, can actually use Play as your distribution mechanism for those apps. You don't have to build a brand new app store, build out a global CDN if you're a global company. You can use Play as that infrastructure. And so we'll handle things like patch updates. We'll handle even some things like security scanning. So Google Play Protect, which is out there looking for malware in the consumer world, we're looking for bad actors who might be spoofing popular video games that have decided to launch outside the Play Store. We've gone through and turned those tools to allow for enterprise use cases as well, to say, hey, you may be picking up a code library that has a out-of-date SSL a library attached to it. We can surface some of those issues directly to you. And then lots of things around publishing, discovery, alpha and beta testing, all that's built directly into Play for enterprises. If you're super concerned from a security perspective, or you say, hey, I don't really want Google touching my enterprise apps, you can host those apps through your EMM and opt to have Play not be the distribution channel, but be the trust model of how those apps get to you. What this ultimately means is that no more unknown sources, no more app wrapping, all this stuff just works as a part of the platform. And at Google Cloud Next, we also announced that Managed Google Play is now out of beta. So we brought out support for Android Runtime for Chrome as a beta project, really bringing native application experiences out to the Chrome operating system and out to Chromebooks. And so we're super excited that all those Managed Google Play tools that I mentioned are now available for enterprise deployments of Chromebooks as well. So over 50 different Chromebooks support Android Runtime for Chrome or ARC today. You can do things like curate applications out by user group. So finance gets the right applications separate from the guys in sales. Not that you'd ever want to separate those departments. And you can deliver policies via the config channel in Play, as well as the cloud management tools for Chromebooks as well. So lots of exciting things there. We're super excited as well that folks like Adobe and Cisco, Trello, and lots of other enterprise developers are starting to build for ARC. And if you're interested, Ken Ford's going to be running a session, I think at noon, about how to think about building for Chromebooks and some of the minor tweaks you want to think about as you build that single code base that goes from smartphone all the way up to laptop. When you think about deployment of Android, a lot of folks, I can build the greatest app in the world, but if nobody gets it, that's its own, a major problem. And so we really think about management and security of applications in two core ways. One is, hey, I want to let users bring their own device, and I only want to manage the enterprise apps that exist on that device. And so that's where we have the ability to deploy what's called a work profile. A work profile is a separate space on the device. So at a technical level, it's a separate user space that runs parallel on the device from the personal user space the user brought in them when they activated their Android device. And so your corporate applications go into that work profile, and because they're now in a separate user space, it means things like data encryption is separate. So data is stored, all of your enterprise data is stored separately from any personal data the user brought with them. It's encrypted with separate encryption keys. You can set set an additional passcode. So if you want to, put your 18-character complex passcode down for your work apps, quick point, by the way, please rethink your mobile security policies. The number of people I see, it's like, I took my LDAP security policy and I applied it to mobile, and then I don't know why my users are angry all the time. The point here, though, is that if you want to put those differentiated policies in place, you can. And from a management security perspective, all IT sees is those enterprise apps. So in a BYOD world, you can just manage the applications on those devices. But what happens if you want to do corporate liable devices? Hey, I want to own the device, I want to own the policy, and here in New York, I'm sure at least one of you works in financial services, and so you have to really think about all the monitoring you need to do over those devices, like communications, network traffic, and the like. Well, we have a whole slew of tools that you can bring to the table for company-owned devices. So you can deploy the devices fully managed. You can think about that as the traditional BlackBerry model, only corporate apps on this device. I whitelist what's allowed to go there. I install the applications silently, and you have no control, Mr. User. That's my space. You can optionally decide to deploy a work profile on that corporate liable device and provide for that segmentation of work and personal, but still the user's allowed to bring some personal applications to the table. So what's a use case of that? Hey, I work in financial services. I still need visibility over everything that's going on that device. But sure, like you should be able to use ESPN, and I don't want to make sure that ESPN is trying to hoover off all my transaction data for the stock market. So that's why the work profile is important in those corporate liable deployments. And finally, dedicated devices. If you want to really lock the device down for mission-specific tasks, things like logistics, where you're going through and you're just using that device as a barcode scanner, we have lots of ways to lock down that device, and you can even really deploy the kiosk mode such that you don't even see things like signal strength, Wi-Fi indicators or the like. It looks like a seatback entertainment device almost on an airplane. Although that's going to be like an analogy in 10 years that won't work anymore. So I'm going to use that while it still can. So what does this look like in the real world? Well, we're seeing some of the largest organizations turn toward Android as the primary way of getting things done. Marks and Spencer has deployed over 9,000 devices in Britain. To really transform a lot of their brick and mortar retail. So if you walk in and say, hey, I don't see any milk on the shelf, they literally just pop open a device, they go, we're out of milk, but the Marks and Spencer 5 blocks away, because they literally are on every street corner, it's like a CVS here in New York, has it, and we'll make sure some set aside for you. Pitney Bowes is actually using Android to reimagine a lot of their workflows in postage metering. So they're actually taking stock Android and building it into their new digital postage scales. And so you can really quickly comparison shop, hey, is DHL going to be cheaper than UPS? And it delivers all that in an interactive experience. It looks like custom hardware. But it's because we can lock that device into a kiosk over the air, it's just standard Android. From a development perspective, it's super easy. And Australia Post has recently signed on to Android. All of their postal folks are using Android devices for barcode scanning, shipment tracking, and the like. So, a lot of folks are curious about, okay, what are the types of applications we see on Android? One of the aspects we really see emerging in the market is things like computer vision and machine learning. So for those of you that aren't aware, last year we brought TensorFlow Lite out to Android, and that allows you to take machine learning models you train in the cloud for things like object recognition, optical character recognition, translation, and run those locally offline on the devices. So this is actually really cool because a lot of use cases, there was an insurance use case I saw where literally I can take a photograph of a car and the phone knows that's a damaged bumper and I know what kind of car it is, and this is a rough estimate based off of thousands of other damaged bumpers I've seen, what the actual cost of that repair should be. So there's a lot of really cool applications when you start to think about business processes where you can use the power of the fact that this is a 1960s supercomputer in my pocket to reimagine imagine how those processes work. And we've really been focused on optimizing those use cases through things like Android neural networks, which brings hardware acceleration to the development environments that you build in. So if you're thinking about like, hey, is this a Huawei device and I know it has hardware acceleration for computer vision, you no longer have to build necessarily specifically to that piece of silicon. We've abstracted a lot of that away for you, and so we've seen a 10x improvement on things like object recognition on machine learning on the Huawei P20. So lots of cool things that we've been doing there from an investment perspective. I'm not going to talk about MLKit because we're starting to run out of time. So what's new for the platform? Obviously, we launched Android Pie recently. Who here is running Android Pie on your phone? Cool, thank you. Hopefully it's been a good experience. I'll talk about some of obviously a lot of things came to Pie as a part of its release on the consumer side. So things like machine learning for battery improvements and finding apps and discovery and all sorts of really cool things there. But we did a lot of investment on the enterprise perspective as well. One is we did a lot of improvements to Google Play. So in addition to standard kind of private app publishing, we also now allow you to publish web apps. So for those of you that are building, using web as a technology, in addition to native, you can now publish those applications out via Google Play. And there's also improved store builder capabilities. So if you're using an EMM to manage your devices, you can customize things like titling categories and store layout, all that cool stuff, so the user has a more intuitive experience to find the applications that you build. We also sort of are rethinking the way management works. So prior to the release of Android Enterprise, or what used to be called Android for Work in the Lollipop timeframe, there was a set of APIs that were released called Device Administrator. Anybody here using Device Admin in an enterprise setting or in any of your apps? A couple people, please stop. Device Admin was honestly never really designed to scale for core enterprise use cases, and there was not as much of a trust model, so like anybody could just declare it and start setting passcodes down to the device, or in some cases lock the user out of their own device. So we've actually marked those APIs from an enterprise perspective, things like password complexity, hardware lockdown for the camera or Bluetooth, as deprecated in Android P. So we throw an exception today. We're going to start turning those APIs off in queue. So if you're managing enterprise devices via standard mechanisms like ActiveSync, which often your mail client uses Device Admin to interpret those policies, or if you're just using an old school Device Admin app to manage your devices, you need to start looking toward Android Enterprise as the new way to move forward. And obviously it unlocks a ton of benefits from a number of policies and configurations and things like app deployment. So that's my sermon on that. From an Android P perspective, we really thought about the release in three core ways. One was allowing the end user who was bringing their own device to work to more intuitively find how to use the applications and use the work profile and make it easier to switch between apps. Two was improvements around dedicated deployments, so improvements around the over-the-air customization of things like kiosk mode. And three is just improved security logging, profile hardening, better encryption, work challenge improvements, all sorts of stuff there. So obviously, Android's P is now out of beta, but what's super exciting to me is that the beta partners are also starting to release Android P commercially to those applications or to those devices that were in the beta. So it used to be, hey, the only device that got the new release of Android was Pixel. So we're starting to now see Nokia and Sony and OnePlus and the like step up to the table as well. So that's, from an enterprise perspective, really important because it ensures better longevity and more quicker feature upgrades for those devices. On the work profile side of things, when we separate work and personal with a work profile, traditionally what that meant was all the applications ended up here on the left-hand side of the screen. All the applications ended up here on the left-hand side of the screen with a little badge. That's what this little briefcase means. That meant that that was the work app. And that actually had a lot of benefits. It means that if I'm bringing something like Gmail to the table, that commercial app that spans both personal and professional, is all that data is kept separate, even though the apps are the same. same. So on iOS, as an example, if you download Gmail, it's one app. Technically, you can delete the app, but the data stays inside the same storage space, if you will. We split that out with the work profile, and we badge it separately, so you can have two versions of Gmail running concurrently with two separate data stores. But what that meant for end users was they didn't really know, am I using the work Gmail app or the personal Gmail app, and how do I know which is which? So in Android P, we actually made that much easier. We just, in the launcher, created a separate area called work. And so you can more easily switch back and forth and find what are the applications that were targeted to me for IT or by IT. It also, frankly, just on a personal level, makes it really easy to not have to scroll through 18,000 other things I've installed to find Concur to go do my expenses. So we just make it really easy to know what the work data is on that device. We also surfaced a feature that was added in Marshmallow, but a lot of users couldn't find because it was buried in settings, and that was the ability to turn the work profile off. So I mentioned to you that this work profile runs as a separate user space, and at Google we've been really thinking a lot around digital addiction and broader digital health, and we don't want people to go down the rabbit hole in their work life either. So what we want to do is make it easy when the day is done to just say, hey, I'm done. This is my device. I want to go and not have to think about work when I leave the office. And so that's what this little toggle button is down here. When you turn off work profile, this isn't a stupid UX trick. We actually disable the user space. So those corporate applications don't consume battery. Those corporate applications aren't getting push notifications. Those corporate applications aren't doing anything until the user comes back to work and decides to turn the profile back on. In Europe, obviously, there's a lot of emerging law, and even there's some case law here in the US around shift workers. It's like, hey, if you're working outside of work hours, there's tax implications or privacy implications. And so if you're using an EMM, you can actually schedule the work profile to turn off. And you can just say, hey, it's 6 o'clock, go home, be with your family. And you can turn that off programmatically. So either option's available to you. We talked about kiosk modes earlier in the presentation. One of the things that is advantageous about Android is the ability to lock the device down into specific experiences tailored for that employee. But what that meant in prior versions of Android to build, like you could run multiple apps in the kiosk, but you had to build your own launcher, and those apps had to know how to talk to one another and know they were in that locked mode. In Android Pie, we actually brought out a custom launcher to the table, which allows you to deploy any application into kiosk mode. So if you're a hotel, as an example, and you're saying, hey, I want to take a tablet and make it look like the St. Regis custom butler and have like custom wallpaper and all that kind of stuff. And traditionally, that room control app to control the temperature or the TV had to know how to work in the kiosk. And if you wanted to deploy something like the Condé Nast Traveler app, it would break. Well, now, because the launcher is built by Google, those commercial applications can be delivered directly into that kiosk experience. So you can, over the air, say, hey, I've signed a deal with Condé Nast. Let me put all their digital publications out to the device. At the end of that deal, you can actually remove all that data. So lots of customization and lots of customization there, and UI flexibility as well. We also added support for shared devices. So if you're running cases where I have a barcode scanner and there's a guy who works from 8 o'clock till 3 o'clock and another person that works from 3 o'clock till midnight. I don't know why the last guy's working so much longer. I'm bad at math. The point here is that you can go through and support what we call ephemeral users. What that means is I log into the device at the beginning of my shift. I get the applications that are right for me. I get custom things like Gmail or Slack or whatever comms tools I'm using. And at the end of my shift, I click log out. All that data is deleted, and the next user can log into the session, get the applications that are right for them. And because those apps are already pre-installed, you're not downloading them all over again. So lots of cool things in Pi there for more of those kind of healthcare, retail, hospitality, shared device cases. We also, speaking of retail, offer the ability to postpone over-the-air updates. So if you have blackout windows for things like the holidays or other mission-critical time periods, and you say, hey, I want to freeze my entire device deployment, on corporate liable deployments, you can do that. You can freeze up to 90 days. So say think of like just before Thanksgiving through Boxing Day in the UK, the time period just after New Year's. And so if you can freeze up to 90 days, and then there's a mandatory 30-day cooling off period. So that means all of February, the device gets updated, and you can freeze it again in March. And so again, it's really designed for cases where you need to freeze the deployment, get extra time to test the applications you have, get extra time to make sure that things aren't being mucked around with over the air. In those deployments. And finally, we launched what's also called the Android Management API. So traditionally, a lot of these features that I've been talking about have to be configured using an Enterprise Mobility Management or EMM system. And we've had a lot of folks come back to us and say, oh, that's fine, but I'm an EMM and I'm having a hard time keeping up with all the client-side improvements that Google's releasing. Or B, I don't necessarily want to run an EMM just to deploy a kiosk and lock the device down. Are there tools available from Google, particularly as we deprecate Device Administrator? And that's what the Android Management API is designed to solve. It's basically a client-side tool that we deploy as a part of GMS, as a part of Google Mobile Services. You can speak to it via web services and basically take all those customization, configuration tools into your own application stack. And there's no client code required. So super simple to use. We're keeping it up to date every 6 weeks, and it's obviously a native experience. We also, on the IT side of this equation, we really see diversity as our strength, but we know that it's sort of hard to choose. There's 200 different manufacturers. There's this thing called Android Go for emerging markets. Like, how do I know which of the thousands of Android devices are actually going to be enterprise ready? And so that's why we launched Enterprise Recommended. So it allows you to not only have a selection of enterprise manufacturers that have stepped up to the table and say, we are going to be ready for business, but it has assurances around things like security updates, that updates will come at least every 90 days, and that the UX around configuration and deployment is standardized across all those devices. So we're super excited that over 31 devices are in that program across 9 different OEMs, and really we hope that whether you're running BYOD and you want to narrow that choice to make sure that the user is bringing enterprise class devices to work, or you're looking at a corporate liable deployment and you want to figure out which platforms you want to select, this should narrow that scope for you and make it easier to deploy. I'm going to skip that. So just to sort of wrap up, we really think that Android is super diverse. It makes it really easy to deploy against any use case. As a platform, it's been proven across enterprises across the globe. And frankly, we're really taking this very seriously. I often get questions. So it's just actually today is my first year anniversary at Google, and I get questions all the time of like, hey, you're a consumer company that focuses on things like YouTube. How serious is this enterprise thing for you? I will say, as a member of the team, this is something we're taking super seriously, and it's an investment area for us moving forward, and lots of cool stuff coming on the horizon. So that hopefully level sets things for you all. I'm going to bring John Markov up, who's way smarter than I am. John's on the developer advocacy team at Google, and he'll actually walk in with a little bit more detail on how to actually implement a lot of this cool stuff and best practices around enterprise apps. So with that, I'm going to hopefully go here and then click here. God, it's amazing when technology works. Thanks, guys. We'll do Q&A at the end. Appreciate your time.